All right. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our initiatives to engage with our alum and find ways to create new opportunities for our students to interact with alumni, to explore new ways in which we can connect our communities together. And today, I'm really thankful to one of our alums, Lara Heacock. Did I say that correctly,
You
Lara?
got it, Laura Heacock. Good work.
Who graduated from Moravian in 1999. And today she will moderate
Sorry.
a panel discussion with a number of industry leaders on ethical leaderships in the corporate world. I'll briefly introduce Lara and then she'll take over. Just in terms of the format for the session, the panel will discuss issues of ethical leadership for the next 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have the last 15 minutes for Q&A. So Lara is on a mission to help leaders succeed without burning out. Lara is an ICF certified leadership coach who spent 20 plus years in corporate America, leading local and international teams in the talent acquisition space. She believes that when work is a true mix of head and heart, we all succeed. Using her kind methodology as a foundation, she works with leaders and teams to create the success they desire without the burnout. Listen to Laura's podcast, Doing Good Business, and read her Monday Motivator column on kindovermatter.com. Lara's achieved her undergraduate degrees in psychology and sociology from Moravian College, and she also holds an MBA. So Lara, thank you again for bringing our panelists together, and I turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. And I jokingly coughed, but I did graduate in 1999. I will go through our panelists just briefly by name, and then I'll ask them to introduce themselves. So as I call you, just give a wave for folks on video. So I'll start. The person to my right on the screen is Matt Tinney, founder and chairman of WME Inc. So Matt, would you wave? Give us a wave and then I'll come back to you. Awesome. Next to Matt, I have Melissa Miller, who is the president of TCB Promotions. Hey, Melissa. I see next to Melissa, Sean Ellsworth, a talent acquisition leader from Vanguard. Vanguard is in Malvern, so not too far away. And then below in the next row, I have Frida Rawlings, the executive director of Gastrointestinal Associates of Abington, right in my neighborhood. And finally, I have Jillian Olsen, my fellow Moravian grad, who is the president of Cherry Ridge Consulting. I'm representing the last millennia. Jillian is representing the new millennia as she graduated in 2000. So Jillian, would you kick off and introduce yourself to our guests today?
Certainly. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Moravian, for having us with this panel today. As Laura stated, I did graduate in 2000, and I have been working in the environmental field pretty much since I graduated. I obtained my degree in biology while I was there and went on to also obtain a master's in environmental science and aquatic ecology down at Drexel. Later on, I didn't jump right away. I am the president and owner of Cherry Ridge Consulting, a small environmental consulting firm located in the Pocono region, and we serve clients throughout the Mid-Atlantic, predominantly in Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey at this time.
Awesome. And Jillian, prior to launching your firm, how long were you in the corporate space?
18 lovely years.
I feel you. Thank you so much. Frida, I'll come to you next, if you don't mind.
Take myself off of mute. My name is Frida Rawlings, and I am currently the executive director for Gastrointestinal Associates, Inc. here in Jenkintown, Abington area. I have been with this organization for a little over 3 years, and prior to that, I've spent about 10 years in the hospital environment as an administrator. I got my degree in business more than, I want to say 25, 30 years ago. So we won't talk much about that because I feel pretty old. But anyway, And since I have been in this role as an executive director here at Gastrointestinal Associates, it's been a wonderful leadership experience, and certainly believe that I have gained a lot and have shared a lot with this organization as well.
Yeah. Frida, what I love about your background is that, I think most of us don't think of our doctor's office as a business. Would you share a little bit about, how many practitioners, the corporate gross revenue, anything that you're comfortable?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. We currently have 20 providers in this organization. We are in 2 offices, one here in this area and one in the Chalfont area. We round at 2 hospitals, the Abington Jefferson Hospital and Holy Redeemer Hospital. And I would say that we produce over, I want to say 4.8 million in revenue gross a month. And it's a pretty viable business. Part of the challenge here as operations leadership is making sure that all of the infrastructure is in place, properly built and, running daily to keep our providers productive, making sure that the appointments and patients are getting the access that they need to our facilities. Because we also do procedures in 3 different units, the hospital and the Chalfont Endoscopy Center, and what we know as 821 ASC over at Holy Redeemer. So there's a lot of work that our physicians do day to day, and making sure that they are, provided with the right level of support. Is critical to making sure things happen for us day to day, and having the right level of staffing and all of that is a day-to-day, minute-by-minute challenge.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just love to expand on that. Obviously we associate the clinical staff, but I know that you have a staff of 50, at
Yes.
least back office folks that are not clinical in no way, shape, or form.
Correct.
So it's good to really
Correct.
contextualize that. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, Matt, would you kindly go next?
Sure. So I am the founder and owner of Windows Management Experts. We are a 14-year-old Microsoft solution integrator. We also do IT staffing and managed services. My commitment and passion is really about empowering others. I built this company. It was pretty much technical. And I was a technical consultant. That's my background. Worked in corporate, worked for government for about 10 years. And then in 2008, I started the company. Over the last 6 months in particular, my focus has really become really about empowering people, creating an empowering culture. Supporting people with their personal goals and how that relates to the business's goals. I'm also married to my amazing husband, Christopher. We have 2 twins that are 19 months old. And when Laura asked me to come join this panel, I was like, absolutely yes. So I love to be able to share my experience and really empowering others, that companies can put people first over profit. So that's kind of my journey, and I'm here to share and answer any questions that anyone has.
Awesome. Matt, you're one of the leaders I think about who started a business, and then X number of years later, you now have a company and you have a formal leadership structure and you have a substantial team. And I love that evolution in, your leadership experience, and also just the organization and how it's grown. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, Melissa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming and sharing some of your time with us. I hope that this time together is meaningful. Even if you grab one takeaway, it's worth it. You'll be surprised the seeds that people can plant in your life that pop up later. So that's what I'm hoping the students and whoever else receive today. So I'm Melissa. I grew up in very modest means. If you told me when I was young I'd be a business owner and president, I would have laughed at you. But there was that one tipping point moment where a professor said to me, or actually a high school teacher, "You're going to college." And so I went to college. I wanted to be a meteorologist. I took the classes to be telling you all about the weather. And then I realized you had to be majorly smart in science. So I bailed and I became a specialist in advertising and I loved it. And so I have an advertising firm here in East Stroudsburg. And I would say we do branded merchandise. So when corporations want their logos on product to increase their brand awareness for multiple reasons, which I won't bore you and get into, but I would say that I really wanted to have my own business so that I could make sure that people had a workplace that they really enjoyed and felt good about. And I wanted to be on this panel. I was excited when I was asked because I think that right now you're not hearing enough about the owners that truly, really care. I think the good news is not always making the front page. So I commend you, Lara, for bringing this up and Moravian for supporting that effort, because I think that there are a lot of business owners out there like myself in the panel who really want to see young people succeed and feel good about their work and what they bring to society as a whole. And I think the young people really care about that. I think this generation coming up care about making a difference. So I just think today is going to be impactful. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Melissa. I love the analogy of planting seeds. I use it often. So let's invite everyone here to see if there are some seeds that we can plant. And Sean, last but never ever least, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks everybody for having me here today. This is a great panel. Man, I do a number of these things and it's a fun panel too. Hey, listen,
I'm a lucky human.
Oh, all of us are. I would say, hey, my life in 30 seconds or less. So we'll go, lightning round here. I was born in Colorado. I'm an Army brat. That means my dad is a career military man. He's a retired Army first sergeant, lived in Texas, lived in New Mexico. And then we moved up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. That's that little thing that hangs on the top of Wisconsin. Anybody been to the UP before? See, you can tell how remote it. Hey, Jillian, way to go. We'll talk more. So
and Rebecca.
And Rebecca, that's awesome. So I'm from the UP, as we call it. Went to college at Wheaton College in Chicago. I'm a big fan of smaller liberal arts colleges. Way to go, Eulenberg. I was ROTC, following in my father's footsteps. I spent 9 years on active duty as a medical service corps officer. So my first job, for example, was to lead a team of 32 medics in a tank battalion. There's 64 tanks in a U.S. Army tank battalion, to give you some scope. Love that job, probably the greatest job I've ever had in my life. Fast forwarding through different jobs in the military, my last 3 years of my 9 years on active duty, I was leading a 3-state Army Medical Department recruiting team in Ann Arbor. I was going to graduate school there at the time at Michigan. That's where I fell in love with recruiting. I'm passionate about recruiting, whether it's Muhlenberg, Vanguard, all of these great organizations represented, the Green Bay Packers. I'll reveal my loyalties, but recruiting is the lifeblood of any organization. So having realized that, when I left the Army in 1996 to move to the Westchester area, my wife's from Westchester. Betty and I have been married for 34 years. We got married when we were 10. No, just kidding. 34 years. We have 6 children, and we'll soon have 6 grandchildren, by the way. I went to work for the Christiana Care Health System down in Wilmington, so I'm listening with great interest to everybody, but especially the background that Frida shared. I was the recruiting director at Christiana Care till just about 9 years ago, 2012. Never thought I'd leave the Army, never thought I'd leave Christiana Care, but I got a call from a headhunter about a job leading a recruiting team at Vanguard. And I was glad to move and switch industries. Healthcare was going through some Affordable Care Act changes back then. I thought it would be a good time to switch industries, and that's been true. Frida, I can tell you're doing great in the industry, so good for you. So I lead a team at Vanguard. Vanguard, real quick, it's a large global company. We've got about 16,000 employees. Our headquarters is in Malvern. We've got domestic locations in Charlotte and in Scottsdale. And here's what I want you to remember about Vanguard. We're client owned. Very different than the rest of our industry, candidly. What does that mean? Does anybody own Vanguard mutual funds or ETFs out there? All right, you own Vanguard. And that's not an overstatement. You truly own Vanguard. We're all about returning investment to you. And when Jack Bogle founded us smack dab in the middle of Chester County 40 some years ago, he was proud to say that we were the sometimes called the anti-Wall Street financial services firm. Our job is to make people like Deborah and others that are client owners successful in their investment journey. That's what we're all about. So that mission and purpose drives us. Really glad to be with you all here today. Thank you.
Sean, thank you. And you just nicely, unknowingly segued us into our first question. You said the mission and the purpose really drives Vanguard. So there's one question that I will ask each of our panelists to give their own answer to. And Sean, if you would kindly start, can you talk about your definition? We're all here today to talk about ethical leadership. I work with leaders all day, every day, and I know the five of you to be ethical. And I'm very lucky, as I said before, to know that about you. So what does that actually mean to you, Sean? How does it show up? How do you define it?
Well, thanks, Laura. And, you know, I heard you say head and heart in your introduction, and I was looking at the origins of Muhlenberg College, going back to Frederick Muhlenberg back in 1848, right? Historically, we're coming through the heels of a pretty tumultuous time in the history of our country. But your school was founded on head and heart, or as he said, education of the conscience. And
so we're actually Moravian grads, and Muhlenberg is just up the street.
I'm sorry.
You are okay.
How could I do that?
They're like
Moravian
this
College.
far apart. You're okay.
No. I knew that 100%. But
Muhlenberg's Moravian's biggest rival, by the way.
Oh boy, that's like me slipping up and saying Ohio State. Boy, that was a big slip. Moravian College, and I have my Moravian star in my other room. So I knew that 100% in our prep session, but I just slipped. So, you know, from Moravian's perspective and from my background as a liberal arts major as well, like I mentioned, when it comes to ethical leadership, it's really about be, know, do. And that was my training back in the 80s as an Army officer. So what do I mean by that phrase, you know, be, know, do in terms of ethical leadership? The be is really what it really simply, you know, there's the connotation there. Like, you got to keep it real. You've got to embrace who you are. Don't try to, especially as a young leader coming out of school, try not to take on the template of some other leadership model. You've got to assess who you are. So that's the be part, right? What are your strengths? And then the know is really leadership takes work. I mean, we've got professors here in the session here today, but it's about, you know, it's that technical knowledge and that holistic personal knowledge, but you got to work at being you got to study leadership. That's why you're here today in the session. But, and then the do, and that's really about, you've got to lead from the front. I'm going to just, you know, as a veteran, I'll shoot really straight. If you're about yourself, then don't be a leader. I mean, you'll still be a leader. You'll just be a bad leader. All right. So you've got to come at this from I'm leading others because I really want to throw myself into the service of others. And I want to see others succeed in their career. So, you know, again, be, know, and do in a nutshell. And those, we could talk more about it, but that's the gist of the way I think about ethical leadership.
Yeah. I love that, Sean. I heard someone say recently, there's a difference between being a leader and just having people report to you. And that's the essence of what I'm taking away from what you say. You know, the leader is the person that does, that knows, and who embodies that leadership presence and is there to serve the people that are in their charge.
Yep.
Thank you. Matt, how about you? When I pitched ethical leadership to you, what does it mean? What do you think? How does it show up for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, quite frankly, ethical leadership is really, you know, it's really doing the right thing when no one is looking, which really is integrity. You know, it's one thing to be nice and to act like you're a great leader in front of your team, but what happens behind the closed door? In your mind, what is going through your mind? Are those thoughts empowering people? So for me, it's really about being honest too, and open communication, respect. It also includes having a diverse equitable, and an inclusive workforce. And that being the heart of everything that, frankly, that I do in my life and in the business. And it's really, it's about breaking those barriers, right? Between what you're taught, like for me, I was taught don't share personal at work. Okay. Now I know that's a bunch of baloney, and you can be who you are at work, and you don't need to put things in buckets. So it's really about breaking the barrier between personal limitations and business. They're really one and the same. I know, my whole corporate life, I was trained to keep them separate, don't share too much information, I was not out in, my corporate jobs, and frankly would get asked questions like, who's your girlfriend, who's your wife, and would oftentimes lie because I wasn't comfortable in the environment and sharing who I was. So for me, it's really breaking those barriers so that people can show up differently, so that, your listening for them is generous, right? Because if your listening is from biased and unconditional things that are in the past, then those people show up a certain way. And so I guess the big thing is like really removing those barriers of your own biases and listening for that which will make a difference for people. That's what ethical leadership is. It's really listening for the gold in what people say and what they don't say, and pulling it out of them so they can see it. So that's what it is for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Frida, how about you?
Yep.
Well, I agree totally with Matt and Sean at this point. I find that, when you're leading people or trying to lead people, you have to be honest, respectful, compassionate. You have to be an example, both in your presence and in your behavior with them. I come from a background too, like Matt said, where you didn't share personal things at work. You certainly kept your personal life separate from your business life. You didn't want people to see you as this human being, that, they, shouldn't see you when you're struggling or having a hard time. You should always carry that barrier, that face that says, I'm the boss, I'm the leader. Well, I find that not to be too effective. You can't get people on the right page when you're not real, when you're not human with them. And being that example to them, both in your presence with them and in your behavior, rolling up your sleeves, being willing to understand what they do and how the day-to-day goes and what some of their challenges are, so that you can then provide the leadership and the direction and the resources that they need, because they're the people who are doing the jobs every day that make your organization work. And if you're not going to take a posture of concern for them or empowerment for them, you're not really leading them in the way that's going to help. I find that when they look good, I look good. So wanting them to be the very best that they can be means, me actually rolling up my sleeves and getting involved, listening to them, keeping my door open to them, and being real when they're struggling, understand, and say, hey, tell me more about that. How can I help? Usually after any coaching session that I may have with an employee, I'll ask them, okay, now that you've shared all of this with me, how can I help you? What is it that I can do for you? How can I be better for you? Or what is it that you may need? And I find that almost takes them off guard. They don't expect that. They don't see all the time that, yes, the boss wants to hear, but is the boss really concerned? Is the boss willing to do something different to try to help me get to where I need to be? And having that genuine understanding with them is very, very helpful. And then after the session, following up with them as the leader. I had one employee say to me yesterday, it's rare, not too rare. I'll go down into the practice every now and then and just kind of do a walkthrough. So yesterday I went down, I just made time to stop what I was doing, just go downstairs and just kind of check in on people, see how people doing. show your face, So I went down, and about 3 hours later, one of the nurses called up. She says, it was really good to see you down in the practice today. I was like, wow, good. I'm glad you like having me down there, and that gave me opportunity to chat with her, say, okay, how's it going today? Is there anything you need? Anything that I should know? That's that kind of conversation. So being real, just being respectful and compassionate and concerned, and getting in there, to me, is real ethical leadership.
Yeah, thank you. So much of that. Melissa, how about you?
So just to add to what all the great panelists have said so far and not repeat, I would say that I feel that ethical leadership is owning the responsibility you have because of the influence you have over others. When people work with you, you have access to them in a very intimate way. And I think it's a matter of taking that seriously. A lot of times you spend more time with your colleagues than you do with your own family. So I think it's taking that responsibility seriously. I think that, again, just not to repeat, because I agree with respect, dignity, trust are all my notes. But one of the things I circled that I haven't heard yet, to me, leadership, ethical leadership is about leaving a legacy you can be proud of. A legacy that the people who knew you, your children, maybe your friends, whatever, that when your life here is done and you can look back on the path you carved and the story you wrote, that the decisions you made affected people positively. And you take that leadership and you do everything you can with it. Every conversation, every business transaction, that you behave in a way that the choice you made mattered and it made a positive impact, as small as it is or as big as it is. In my industry, my organization, at this phase, I don't have HR. I'm HR. And I think I'm pretty good at it-ish. I mean, I don't have a degree in it, but I really care. I really pause to listen, as one of the panelists said. And I think that ethical leadership, defined for me, is just pausing enough to care and to make sure the choice you made is one you'd make again if you could do it again.
Thanks, Melissa. And Jillian, round us out. What does that phrase mean for you?
So again, agreeing with everything that, the full panel has said so far and brought to the table. And what I had jotted down just to remind myself, but it's already been, spoken, but for me, truly, it's being true to your values and how you honor them in how you interact with your employees, your clients, your friends, your family. I think leadership goes beyond the workplace. It's how you show up every day and how you bring that forward as your person and what you do. Right now, in my business, just 3 years old, I am a sole proprietor, working to hire my first employee. Interesting story with that actually one of my former staff reached out to me because he always respected the way that I did lead him. In one of my former roles as a senior manager, I led a staff of 5 people. And I believe, between what Frida had said and Sean, I always led with a mentality of coaching my employees. And I believe that's a really ethical approach. I wanted them to be part of the team. I was a coach at points in my life, so it was natural for me to do that as well. But I feel that doesn't mean you have to be that number one strong person out there and have all the answers. You can sit there and say, I'm not sure. Let yourself be vulnerable. Work with the team. Know what you don't know. And, be true to that. To me, that is one of my values, is understanding what I don't know, and being able to say that to folks and work together to come up with that solution. So I think that's, that brings it around to what we're all saying, is that, honor your values, know your team, listen, have empathy, and just be real. Be a real person and be available to have those discussions.
I love that. So Jillian, since you're hanging out off of mute, I'm wondering if you'll kick us off and talk a little bit about the intersection of ethical leadership and the environment as it relates to the work that you do.
Absolutely. So you had kicked that to me when we had kind of our preparation discussion, meet each other. And I actually dove into, I have 3 separate professional certifications, and each one of them has a code of ethics that I reaffirm to every year and sign off on. And I pulled up the one that definitely has the most meaningful ones to me in my day-to-day. And that is my qualified environmental professional certification. And the number 1 item in the code of ethics is to hold paramount the protection of human health and the natural environment. And that is exactly what I do as an environmental consultant. The majority of my clients are large corporations or industrial facilities. I do work with some land developers as well, but again, they would still be corporations. But I choose who my customers are and work with those that have that same ethical mentality. They're choosing to work with me as their consultant to make sure that they're abiding by the applicable regulations, that they're doing things right from the beginning. I don't have clients that come to me that, oops, I made a mistake. I made a violation. Help me fix it. They're coming to me at the forefront. What do I need to do to make sure that I protect everything, that I do this right? Most of my work is in wetlands protection and finding out, where the wetlands are before we build a facility, what the setbacks are, things like that. Things were different, decades ago when it came to wetlands. Everyone understands now they need to be protected for a variety of reasons. Nature, flood protection, water quality, and general industry respects that and understands that. It's the right thing to do, it's the ethical thing to do. And there are the clients that I work for, and that's, to me, just reading that first line in one of the code of ethics, that's a certification I've had now for 15 years. That really sticks out to me as where that all comes together and what that means. If you're doing anything with the environment, I think ethics is a huge role in that. We only, as of now, have this one planet. We don't know yet if there's life on Mars. Did hear there might be water on one of the moons of, I think was it Jupiter or one of them? I don't know, but it's in a frozen state, so not useful for us yet. But right now, this is all we have, so we need to protect it.
Thank you so much. All right, we're checking into which moon has some viable water options when we all get off this Zoom. So Nat, I know that you recently, and you alluded to this when you introduced yourself, that you've made some shifts in the last 6 months. And one of those shifts is adding an ethics clause into your contract. So Matt's company provides a service to others. So can you share a little bit about that ethics clause, why you put that in there? What has been the business impact of including that in your legal agreements?
Yeah, so I was thinking back about how I got this idea. It was actually from another group with Philly tech startup leaders. And we are a group of, technology leaders in the Philadelphia area that are committed to this exact thing, ethical leadership, which is pretty cool. I never use those exact words, but this whole idea really came out of that group. A bunch of us were sharing some of the experiences we had in some of the customer and partner interactions, where the employees were, not being treated with respect. And, I realized, wow, I'm really not alone on this when other people started sharing. And, just that the lack of the values that were demonstrated in these relationships with the clients and partners, and it creates this toxic environment for our project teams and our staff, which actually trickles down to and impacts the culture, it impacts the management, and actually impacts the bottom line. Because when you look at it, you start having high turnover, you have, things missed because the customer, because the employees aren't, they're not comfortable sharing, issues because of that toxic environment that's created. So, and over the years, we kind of just tolerated it and we worked through it. You got to push through things. You got to be strong suited. Oh, the customer's always right. That's a bunch of baloney. I'll tell you that right now. And it's a bunch of baloney because we tolerate it and we get to say how it goes. This is a business that's services oriented. In order to help people, we also need to be straight with ourselves. If it violates our values, then we shouldn't be working with you. It's the same thing with Jillian was saying. And so that's when I said, I contacted my lawyer and I said, what about an ethical clause? Could we just put it into our agreement? And, he added one in within a day. And, basically this ethic clause is really, it's providing that notice to the client that we have the ability to discontinue work if you violate any ethical obligations and our values. And if you disrespect our employees, if you create toxic environments that are not conducive of having our project teams thriving in values that we represent, then we will have the right to complete the project and move on. And it's not about burning bridges. It's really about making a statement that while we appreciate the opportunity to help you, customer and partner, provide value, we will not be working in toxic environments that disrespect and don't value and honor our staff. So it actually takes, it took me 14 years and it took me literally a day to create the agreement, but I feel like until the leadership team, until the owner, and that's myself here, was ready to make a statement like that and to put it out there. And let me tell you, I've gotten a lot of pushback on it. And you know what? That's fine, because I realize now the pushback is the resistance against the grain of what's normal in business. It's normal to disrespect people. Okay, well, then we're not really committed to working with you. And there's a lot of unsaid communication. There's the body language too, which is hard to do over Zoom, but you can tell when there's passive aggressiveness. Shoot, I lived in Seattle. I know all about passive aggressiveness. And it varies from culture, from region to region, and from East Coast to West Coast. But I think that this is probably one of the biggest, boldest moves that I ever made, because you're basically you're completing a project that, it might be a multi-million-dollar project just because they are not respecting your staff. Like, that's a whole nother level of oh my gosh, just take a deep breath and do it. That's what I did, and my CEO is on board with it, but it really took me getting out of my own way, I guess is what I'll say. It took me personally getting to that point and having it show up in the business.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's a nice segue to Sean as well. Sean, you said something that really caught my ear as a recovering everyday perfectionist. You had said that ethical leadership doesn't mean doing it perfectly. Can you share a little bit about that statement and what that means for you?
Yeah, I think a phrase that pops to mind around that, Laura, is, fail fast, learn in your leadership career, especially as you're starting out in your career. So I'll share an example. I was a brand new lieutenant. That's the lowest ranking officer in the military. So brand new, meaning 6 months in. Candidly, maintenance is important, because if you don't have your equipment in the military or in any of our jobs, really, you can't do your job. Well, long story short, my Humvee windshield was cracked. My battalion commander came by at the wrong time, sent my entire medical platoon to the field for 10 days. Okay. to fix our vehicles.
Hmm.
So yeah, as I look back, that was a failure on my part as a brand new leader. But did I learn? Oh yeah. Yeah, eating MREs for 10 days in the middle of the Georgia, swamp will get your attention. I remember calling my wife saying, it's about Friday at 5 o'clock, 1,700 hours in the military, saying, I'm not going to be home tonight. Well, when are you going to be home? I don't know when I'm going to be home. I'll call you when I get back to post. And it was about 10 days. So that's just a small example of, listen, embrace the learning. I'll tap back to one of Matt's points there, like swimming against the stream with his ethical clause. Another phrase that pops to mind is like, if you're uncomfortable, you're learning. So, come at your early leadership life that way. If you're uncomfortable and you're not learning, that's a whole nother discussion. That'll be another panel, another time, right, Laura? But you guys get my point. It's like, you're going to fail, especially early in your career. And I know we've got your teachers and professors here, in the group, but, learn from it, embrace it. And then finally, I'll tie into this, Laura, a little bit. I want to get this point across, especially early in your leadership career, have a good mentor, somebody who's senior to you. Mine was Sergeant First Class Nieves, my platoon sergeant. And my father's a retired Army first sergeant. And he told me early, go find a senior non-commissioned officer, a sergeant, or somebody within your organizational climate. You can think of those examples. Are going to be honest with you. I mean, they will really yank your chain. And especially when it comes to leadership, if they get a hint that you are about yourself and you're not thinking about the development of others around you, like the panelists have brought up, you need somebody who's going to keep you honest and be blunt honest with you, especially early in your leadership career.
Awesome. Thank you for normalizing failure. So Frida, I want to ask you a hard question. And I know this is experience that you've had, but sometimes in every organization, we have to separate from people. We have to terminate. Can you talk about, how you arrive at that decision ethically, how you handle it ethically? It's just a reality, but under this umbrella of ethical leadership, how does that happen?
Yeah. And it does. I've had experience in multiple backgrounds, personally myself, of being let go from an organization. And then I've also seen others, in leadership, how they will dismiss an employee, and it's cold, it's cold-blooded. It's not compassionate at all. It's not respectful. What's in the forefront of their mind is, okay, this doesn't work for us, and we can't use you, and that's it. And they normally just let the person walk out the door, which in my opinion is very devastating emotionally and mentally to that individual. Without having the benefit of some coaching along the way or some conversations about their performance, it's critical to make sure that that person is being held accountable to the expectations that you have of them. So even now, as I am coaching my operations manager, when she's dealing with, employees who are not performing well, I'll always ask the question, have you started documentation? Have you started any meetings with that individual? You can't come to me today and say, oh, we're having a problem with such and such, and I want to let her go, without having that trail of conversations and documentation and setting clear expectations of them. But if you've done all of that, and you finally get to the place where you say, okay, this individual is not meeting the mustard. They're not able, to perform the job duties that's required of them. I think having conversations that lead up to that day of termination is important. Be honest with them. Jane, we've had multiple conversations about your performance. And I know, and as well as you've been struggling. And we're having some real serious concerns because I think we've provided to you everything that you need up until this point to do this job well, and you continue to fail. I'm asking you one last time, what is it that you think you're struggling with? Give that person the opportunity of being able to come to the realization themselves that they are failing at the job, and that they cannot do the job, and that they have failed to meet your expectations along the way. and let them know that this organization, hey, this is what we really need in this job role. So unfortunately, I think today will be your last day because we really do need this. Is there something that you want to share with me? Being able to respectfully terminate is important, to give that individual their dignity and support. I had an experience in one of my previous lives with a woman who was not performing her job well. And I sat with her, I met with her for about a half an hour or so and talking about it. And when she finally got home that day, her son called me back, her grown son called me back. And he says, I just want to thank you for terminating my mom so gracefully. I was shocked. I had never had anyone say those words to me. And, especially in such a situation as tough as that, you're affecting someone's life. You're affecting their ability to make a living. But at the same time, as a leader, you're responsible for making sure that your organization thrives and that you have the right individuals in place that can do the job and do them well. I look at termination, no matter whose fault it might be, as a twofold responsibility. I could generally say sometimes that I think I failed you, even though I thought I gave you all of the resources or the education that you need to do your job. I think I might have failed you in my ability to be able to do that. And so this is, the end of the road for both of us. But, I want to support you as you move into your next arena. And if you know the person well enough and you know what their strengths are, certainly give them kudos about their strengths, give them, some support in those strengths and let them know that you're always going to be there to help them along to the next step. Real life examples, when I was terminated in one of my life roles, it made me, the woman that I became at that point. I mean, I was taking another step up and I had no idea that I would ever be in that position had I not lost the previous job. So I try to share that example with folks that I may have to, terminate, that this does not mean it's the end of the road for you. It could be a stepping stone for your next career opportunity.
Wow, I just have to jump in and say that is so great for you. That's such good advice. And I think treating people with dignity is so critical to ethical leadership, even in these very difficult conversations. And I just would want to tie in at Christiana when I was there. It's very similar to what you're describing. We had what was called a decision-making leave. So it might be to that scenario where we were getting to the end, but you might call that employee in, like in your example, at 9 o'clock in the morning, have that same conversation, but say, so I want you to go home and think about this. And come back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Let's sit down in my office again. But you kind of put it back on that employee to say, let's really give you the space to kind of really grapple with this. But I just tie that in because your examples were so on point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I love that it's a two-way street. Thank you so much. So Melissa, bring us home. You are someone who I know started an organization on a foundation of ethical leadership. It was very important to you when you started your company to be ethical. Can you share a little bit about your why? Why was that such a critical component of starting your organization?
Absolutely. So I like what Sean said, and I'll tie it into my bring us home. He said, put yourself around people who will keep you honest, people that can help you. And I think in my experience, 10 years ago, actually, when I was working with a person who I looked up to. I was working for her and I thought that she was going to take me places. I had all these bright-eyed, bushy-tailed ideas of what take me places meant at that time. And so 20 years ago, my journey began at that organization, and I wanted to impress, and I wanted to do well, and I wanted to keep up. And I remember feeling immediately that the way that we were working was unethical. And so I wrote in my notes today, I felt it immediately, but I acted later. It's like I felt it immediately. I knew what I was doing for my employer at that time was unethical, but I didn't feel brave enough, be really transparent, to say something. I was the only one that thought the way we were conducting business was wrong, perhaps maybe even illegal. I didn't really feel comfortable at the time to share it. I didn't know what I didn't know. Everyone was doing it this way. Everyone was conducting their business and their sales strategies in ways that just seemed wrong to me. But because I was the only one that thought it seemed weird, I could literally remember being like, wait, you want me to do what? You want me to go take a check presenter from the restaurant, press out someone else's serial number and pass it to the client as my sample?
Whoa.
And I did it. I did it. And I hated it. And I didn't like it. And I just thought, I'm a goody goody and I don't know how to do sales and I'm not swimming with sharks. And eventually it wore me down, and eventually I kept myself honest. And I said, I'm out of here. I don't need your money or your high level positions or your high rises. I mean, it was fun, but not at the exchange of my legacy and my dignity. It wasn't, nothing's that fun. And so I walked away and I said, I'm starting my own company and I'm going to teach people integrity and honesty. And I'm going to allow them to open their mouth when they think something's wrong, maybe that I don't see. Matt said some things that were interesting, allowing people to share what they're comfortable with. My level of comfort may not be your level of comfort. And we all have something to give. So I think for me, I love what Sean said. Make sure as you walk this world that can be challenging, keep people around you that can point you in the right direction. Don't be afraid to say you don't know what's right or wrong. I was a young 20-year-old. I just entered the workforce. I didn't know. I mean, I knew I had a gut, but I was unsure. I was wrestling. I was struggling. And I wrestled and I did what I wanted to do because I thought that I wanted to do well. And as time went on, I learned doing well was defined much, much better and much more ethically, as we've said here today. So I would just say, let your story define you. Don't let someone else's story define you, who you are, and keep your integrity high. And you might find yourself in situations where you don't know what to do, but go home, think about it, and come back and have those hard conversations. Bring the conversations up that are hard. You know, Matt, I think my takeaway from your contracts and what you said is just do it afraid. My kids tell me all the time, what's bravery? Bravery is doing it afraid. So when you're having those conversations that are hard in the workforce, you know, just be brave, go out there and seek mentors. And yeah, and if anybody wants to talk to me, I have a real passion for young people because of what I went through. I think that I'd always be there for any of you. Hopefully you'll have our contact information in the end. But yeah, I can go on about this topic for some time because for quite a long time it defined me, and it is my why. It is why I started my business.
Yeah.
So
Melissa,
good.
thank you so much for
That's
that. I think
fantastic.
that, yeah, like in our 20s, and look, we're talking to students, right? We've all been out of the student realm for a long time, but Melissa, that's so meaningful because often in our 20s, we didn't know, you know, you spoke to that. You didn't know that there was another way of doing business. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to pull this particular panel together and the five of you very distinctly and individually, because I want people to know who are about to go into the workforce that there are better ways. There are ethical leaders out there, and there are companies that do things differently than that organization that you came from. So if you want to start a business like some of us, that's great. If you want to just find ethical leaders, you know, there's a bunch of people here that are willing to support you in that journey. So Akbar, I'll turn it back to you with great thanks and gratitude. Oh, you're muted, my friend. It's the Zoomism
Yes.
of 2021. I'll get
Thank
a
you so
t-shirt.
much. This was a great conversation for thinking about ethics. One of the things I particularly enjoyed as a social scientist was the emphasis that ethical leadership is a process. And it is shaped by socialization. So for all of us faculty that are here, we're really happy to see this emphasis on socialization and how it shapes our sociological imagination, you know, being a central feature of how we think about questions of leadership. I think I want to basically turn it over to the students to see what kind of questions they may have to some of our panelists for thinking about this issue.
Yeah, and feel free to throw them into chat or to just unmute yourselves and yell out if there's any questions. And I know we ran a little late on time, so if any of our panelists have to drop off, I totally understand. But if there's questions, feel free to just unmute, yell it out, or chat it up. And actually, panelists, if you want to put your LinkedIn or your contact info in the chat, feel free to do that while we're waiting for some questions.
While students are thinking about these questions, I'll start off with asking one of them. I know Melissa and Matt talked about it in some capacity, but what advice would you give students who are, again, right, at a very different stage of career planning when they find themselves in positions of unethical leadership?
I mean,
I'll jump. Go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, I'll take that question. I think to piggyback Sean's answer, I think it would be to find a trusted person in your life that has a few years of experience that can guide you, that you can trust. And I can be one of those people for you from here on out. But I think that also being okay with going home in that moment that took place where you felt you were under unethical leadership and thinking about it and processing it and giving it its due time in your mind. And then not being afraid, go bold, request a meeting with that person, show up with some documents that you took notes. And on last Thursday, I felt that this incident made me feel X. And I would come at it, my advice is to come at it after the event. Sometimes when it's taking place, emotions are high. Schedule a meeting later and address it then, and put yourself near some people that can guide you.
The only thing I'd add, and Melissa brought it out in her personal example, is count the cost. Sometimes you have to be willing to say, my personal integrity is more valuable to me than my job. I can find another job, but my name is all I've got.
Even when it means taking on someone who is very high in the organization. And I had to do that at one point in one of my roles. It was unacceptable to watch a high-level executive belittle another manager in public, in front of everyone to see. It was very upsetting. And I actually approached her later after the event. I went into her space, into her office, and just, really just respectfully said, I think it was just unfair for you to treat so-and-so this way. And of course, because they were that kind of leader that just says, I'm the boss and this is what I do. And if you don't like it, suck it up. She said to me, well, what would you want me to do about it? And I said, well, since you asked, I think an apology is in order.
For you.
I would appreciate that you would apologize to that person. She turned all shades of red. Name the red color, she turned red. And looked at me square in my eye and she says, okay, bring that person in here. And so I did. I went down the hall. I got that individual. I brought them into her office. I stood there and she, said, I'm sorry, but you could tell that this was not her forte. This was not the way she does business. And I interrupted it. I actually interrupted the way she would normally have done business. And I got to tell you, I lost my job over that, but to me, it's worth it. It was worth it. I would do it again if I had to,
Because your legacy and who you are as a person, and it just was worth it to you. I would do it again too.
Yeah.
Next panel, courageous leadership.
I got to run. See you guys.
Thanks so much, Sean. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Sean.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Sean.
All right. I didn't see any questions pop up in the chat. So anyone have anything to add before we wind up for the day? All right, we're good.
Well, thank you again on behalf of the department and the college. I want to thank all the panelists and you, Lara, for organizing this for us. We're really delighted that the students could have access to this way of thinking as they are struggling with many ways of, thinking about who they are as individuals as they kind of go out into the world. And I hope this is one of many future opportunities that we can have to collaborate. Even if you're not a Moravian alum, again, Pat Hanna is here from the Career Services and Alumni Office as well. on behalf of our department, please reach out to us. We really want to create these opportunities to engage with folks that are out in the field to help better prepare our students for the world that is changing so rapidly that, the rules of the past don't no longer apply. And then, so I know I am really grateful for all of you taking this time to share your invaluable experiences and perspectives to, just help our students think about nuances within which, the world is so complex, yet could be so simple in the way we approach it.
Well said.
So thank you again. And then I look forward to, building these networks and exploring new possibilities.
Thank you for having me. It was
Yeah.
wonderful to be a part of this panel. You guys are fabulous. I can't wait to get to know some of you better.
I love all
Thank
of
you very much.
I
Have a
bring
great
love and
Very
weekend, everyone.
insightful and very helpful. I'm sure our students got a lot out of the discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you all.
Wonderful.
Have an amazing weekend. Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.